1 minus 5? What is negative 1 minus 5? Negative 6. Negative 3 minus negative 1.
Negative 2.
Try again. Negative 3. Oh, you are right. Sorry. Just kidding. Negative 3 minus negative 1. And negative 1 minus negative 3.
2.
Positive 2. Okay. Now let's do, so that's first differences. First differences don't match, right? Let's try second differences. So negative 2 minus negative 6.
Positive 4.
Positive 4. And 2 minus negative 2.
Positive 4.
Positive 4. So what do we think here?
Yep.
Hi.
Hello, Megan and Marissa.
Megan and Marissa. Okay. So I'm sorry, what do we think?
Oh, there. Hi.
Chelsea. Let's hold that in. We are indeed. What do we think about this one?
It's quadratic.
Quadratic, why?
Because the second pair is the same.
Okay, the second differences match. Okay, so I kind of took up all of my writing space here, but I would say this is quadratic. Because second differences match. Okay? Quadratic because second differences match. Good. Okay, vertex of the parabola. Where is it? Okay, but we need a coordinate.
Negative 3. I mean, 3 and negative 5.
Okay, so 3 to the right and then 5 down. So the vertex is 3, negative 5. Now this part is the part I want you to pay attention to because we didn't emphasize this a whole lot when we went over this in class. But it says give the minimum or maximum value. So first of all, is this minimum or maximum? Minimum because it's at the bottom. Okay. The value of a function, when it says value, it's talking about the y value. Okay, because it's talking about the dependent variable. So the minimum value of this function is negative 5. Okay, it's located at 3, negative 5, but the minimum value is negative 5. You're going to want to write that down, that when I'm asking you for a value, I'm talking about the y coordinate. Okay? It's going to be important. Okay, looks like I didn't make you do number 3. I don't know why. You could have done number 3. Oh, okay. Number 4. Find the zeros of this graph, or of this equation from the graph below. So they already graphed it. Where are the zeros? Okay, it's the place where it crosses the x-axis. Okay, zeros are where it crosses the x. Okay, so the zeros here, you're absolutely right, would be at negative 2 and positive 3. Now some of you, I remember when we took the test on this stuff, some of you like to make up zeros. Okay, like if you have a graph that's floating up here, I've seen some of you do this. You say, you make this imaginary line and you say, okay, this is a 0 and this is a 0. Okay? It's always, always, always the x-axis. And if it doesn't cross the x-axis, what do we say? There's no solutions. Yeah, there's no zeros. Okay? So it might be helpful when you get to a problem like this where it's asking for zeros to just darken in that x-axis. Okay? So that you can see. Questions on that? Okay, axis of symmetry. Anyone remember how to do axis of symmetry? Oh, like to type it in? You could. There's a way you could do it that way. Not quite. There's a little formula for it. Well, okay, let's start with this. What is the axis of symmetry in a parabola? Oh boy.
Oh, wait. It's the vertical line that divides the parabola in half.
Beautiful, Judy. Where did you find that information?
My nose.
Oh, all those notes that I've made you take over and over and over again. Okay? The axis of symmetry is the line that runs up and down. Whoops, that's kind of thick for you to see. But it's the vertical line that runs up and down the middle of the parabola. And remember that the formula is always x equals some number. Now that number you can find out with an itty-bitty little formula, and as soon as I write it down, you're going to remember it. Does this look familiar? Negative b over 2a. Oh, come on, this one's not that bad. What's b?
12x. Negative 12.
B is negative 12. So it'd be positive 12 when we put it in our formula. So it'd be positive 12 over 2 times what's a?
1.
1. Good. What's that?
What formula is that?
This is for the axis of symmetry, but are you asking about the quadratic formula? This is similar to the quadratic formula, isn't it? There's another chunk that goes in for the quadratic formula. But, yeah, this is similar to it. So, I'm sorry, it says 12 divided by 2 times 1. Now, this one isn't really going to matter how you put it in your calculator because it's a 1. But if this was any number besides 1, we would have to be very careful to put parentheses around that. What does this come out to be?
6.
6. And remember, these are the ones that you have to say x equals 6. You have to put the x equals. Okay, because it's an equation for a line. Okay, so that means the line x equals 6 would split this parabola in half. Good? Looks like we're skipping 6 and 7. Jump over to the back. Yeah. Yes, you'll all just have to wonder how much time you really have left. It's like an eternity. Okay, number 9. Use the graph to solve the quadratic function. So here's the equation. The equation that you're really trying to solve is this. X squared plus 4x minus 5 equals 0. But they've done a graph of that equation for you. So on the graph, what do you look for a solution? Remember? We just did it.
Oh, then I do
Don't even have to work that hard. You could, but if you've got a graph sitting in front of you, which points are the solutions? Nope. I'm looking for the values that would make it equal to 0.
Oh, where the x and y?
Well, this is 0, 0. But does that word sound familiar to you? If I'm looking for the place where it's equal to 0, what do we call those places? The zeros. The zeros are the places where that's equal to 0. And where are the zeros on a graph?
0.
Okay, someone raise your hand because I just heard a lot of blah, blah, blah. Jordan, go for it.
Negative 5 and 1.
There you go. Negative 5, positive 1. These are called the zeros because they're the place where if you put it in for x, it would equal 0. Okay? So, and for these, because these are solutions, you do want to say x equals negative 5 or x equals 1. Remember we talked, there were a bunch of different ways we could solve. We did a flip book on this, I think. This was right after we came back from spring break. We did, you could solve by doing a graph. You could solve by doing the quadratic formula. You could solve by factoring. You could solve all those different ways. This was one of them, which graphing is not usually my favorite method, but if they're handing you a graph and saying, here, look at this, then that's pretty easy. Okay? Okay, this next one says to solve by factoring. What do we have to do before we can factor this? Good, set it equal to 0. So let's move this 11x over. So I'm going to end up with x squared minus 11x plus 18 equals 0. And notice how I squeezed that 11x in the middle because that's the format that we want. We want x squared and then x and then our number. Okay, do you remember from yesterday how I would go about factoring this?
They're going to be the same and they're both going to be
Good. Yeah, so I'm going to have 2 parentheses. Jordan notices it's because this last number is positive that my two signs are going to be the same. And they're going to match that one in the middle then, so they're both going to be minus. And now what do we want as far as our numbers go? What are we trying to find?
Something that multiplies by 18.
Okay. Okay, multiplies to 18, adds to 11. 9 and 2. Good. 9 and 2 make 18 and add to 11. So, and it doesn't matter which place they go in, right? Because they're both negative. Now, is that it? Have we gotten to our solution yet? Thanks, Maddie. Okay, solutions look like x equals something and x equals something. How do we get our two somethings? You remember this?
I remember when
Oh, you don't bring
What, Trevor?
like that.
There you go. Yep. So we would have to say, gosh, I leave myself so little room. X minus 2 equals 0. I took the first parenthesis equals 0. Or x minus 9 equals 0. And so if x minus 2 equals 0, what would I do to solve this one?
Add 2.
Add 2. So x would equal 2. And this one I would add 9. So x would equal 9. So my two solutions are x equal 2, x equal 9. Whoops, sorry, you can't see that down there. Okay. So when you factor, you're going to break it into two pieces. Make sure it's equal to 0 first. Break it into two pieces, set each piece equal to 0, and then solve each piece. You okay with that?
Yep.
And factoring we covered yesterday. How you feeling on that stuff? Eh? Eh? Okay. Okay, these ones you like. Solve using square roots. What do you want to do?
Add 1 to
Good. Add 1. So 16x squared equals 1. Then what?
you take the square.
Not yet.
You divide.
Good. Yeah, we have to get rid of that 16 before we divide. Divide by 16. Now, probably a question like this they would want you to leave as a fraction. Let's go ahead and leave it as a fraction, because 1 over 16 becomes kind of a sloppy decimal. Now, as a survival strategy, you could do this as a decimal, and then if your answers were given to you as fractions, would you know how to convert it back to a fraction in your calculator? Okay, remember, if you have a fraction up on your calculator screen, you can go to the math button, and the very first option is fraction.
Yeah.
Okay? Okay, so I end up with x squared equals 1 over 16, and then what would I do with it from there?
Square root it.
Now square root it. And the reason I'm not scared of leaving that as a fraction is that to do a square root here, all I have to do is the square root of 1, which is what? 1. And the square root of 16, which is 4. So it would be 1/4. What very important thing am I forgetting?
Positive or negative.
There you go. When you take a square root, you have to do positive and negative. I can almost guarantee you, because I happen to know personally the person who wrote your exam, that there's a question on your exam like this, where one of the choices is just 1/4, and one of the choices is plus or minus 1/4. And if you choose the 1/4 without the plus or minus, that's wrong. Okay, it's got to have the plus or minus. Remember, the last two, if you look back at numbers 9 and 10, those we also solved. And do you see how we came up with two answers for each one? These should almost always have two solutions. Okay, and that's how you get your two solutions there. Okay, 15, quadratic formula. I'm actually going to grab a little scrap of paper here because the quadratic formula is kind of massive. Do you remember the quadratic formula?
Negative b plus or minus
Good. Let's do one of these. Okay, there's 15. I'm going to do this. So quadratic formula, I would write it down here just so you have it when you go to do your assignment tonight. Plus or minus b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And in this problem, in number 15, well, first, before we even start, what do we have to do? Yeah, it's got to be equal to 0 first. So let's move that 8 over. When I move that 8 over, what will this look like?
2x squared plus 7x plus 3.
Good. Okay, and so what's A?
2.
B?
A.
And C. Okay, 2, 7, and 8. Let's plug them in. So x equals -7 plus or minus square root of 7 squared minus 4 times A times C all over 2 times A. And where do we start with this as far as calculating it? Yeah, I would do this square root piece first. I'm going to let you guys do that. Oh, it's going to be an interesting one. An error?
Oh, 'cause it's,
Does that mean you did it wrong?
isn't it negative?
Well, nope.
No.
Oh,
This is positive.
7 squared first.
Nope, not necessarily. Let's try this. Let's do just the 7 squared minus 4 times 2 times 8 without the square root. No square root this time. Just do 7 squared minus 4 times 2 times 8.
Oh, you got negative. You can't do
Right, you get negative what?
it.
Okay, so really what you're asking your calculator to do, I'm going to fill this in. You're asking your calculator to do the square root of -15. And this right here is a big no-no, right? Okay, so this right here tells us that this one has no solutions. Okay? If we were to graph this one, it would be a floater. Okay? So 15, no solution. Okay, 16 says find the number of real solutions using the discriminant. Do you remember what the discriminant was? Okay.
Isn't that like 1 or 2 or 1?
Well, the discriminant tells you how many solutions you have. And it's just this piece of the quadratic formula. You know how just a second ago I told you to type that piece in without using the square root symbol? That is the discriminant. So it's just b squared minus 4ac. Okay? So for this problem, what's b? Try again. Negative 18. No x. So negative 18 squared minus 4 times, what's a? 1 times c. Okay? Type that in, please.
Yeah.
0. Okay? If the discriminant is 0, does that mean I have no solutions?
No.
What does that mean? You remember? Well, let's start here. If the discriminant is positive, what does that mean? 2 solutions. Good. And just a second ago, we found out that if the discriminant is negative, that would be how many? Back here when we did problem number 15, and we had a negative number, how many solutions? None, right? We had no solution back here. So positive means 2, negative means none. What do you think 0 means? 1 solution. Okay? So this answer would be 1 solution, 1 real solution. And that means that if you were to look at it as a graph, it would be sitting right on the axis like that. Okay? Or it could be upside down, but basically the vertex is going to be right on the x-axis. Does that stuff ring a bell? Okay. How are you doing on the pink packets?
Good.
You've kept up so far? How many of you feel like you're on top of things? Like you're done with what needs to be done today? Awesome. Okay.